Time to go in the trenches on This Week in Football presented by Geico. You know, the biggest story in football right now is one that takes us off the field and one that tugs at the emotions of any person, never mind athlete. The Dolphins' Richie Incognito has been suspended indefinitely after bullying fellow offensive lineman Jonathan Martin to the point that Martin left the team. The layers of this troubling story continue to be peeled back. Most recently, the transcript of a voicemail left by Incognito in April to Jonathan Martin saying, "Hey, what's up, you half-expletive piece of expletive? I want to expletive in your expletive mouth. I'm going to slap your expletive mouth. I'm going to slap your real mother across the face. Expletive you. You're still a rookie. I'll kill you." This is just one example, guys, of, I mean, there is a lot of voicemails out there, text messages, according to different reports that have been obtained in one form or another. This one released to all of us. Ross, when you see that from one teammate to another, what's your initial reaction?
I'm stunned. And this thing has changed throughout the past week or so. Initially, I thought Jonathan Martin maybe just left the team because of the stress and the pressure of playing the position. Then some of the stuff comes out over the weekend. I understand hazing, and there are certain things that are a rite of passage in the NFL. I've never heard of voicemails or text messages that are threatening, that are racial. That goes way over the line.
I think hazing is not even part of what's going on. I think, Jonathan Martin is going to, have a lot of GMs asking questions. Does he have the makeup to play in the league? Not just Rich, Rich is going to be, pointed at and say, like, this guy's a bad guy. And he's a knucklehead. He's a jerk. And there are jerks all over the league. But for a guy to be so out of place and out of whack where he couldn't defend himself or speak up for himself and to spend thousands of dollars of doing things, like, it's going to be a bunch of questions.
Here's the problem. I think a lot of people do have that defense. Well, it's an NFL locker room. He's a 350-pound man. Mm-hmm. Why is he letting himself be bullied like that? But that is turning the victim into the criminal. That's not right. I mean, this is Richie Incognito's the problem.
Again, this is my view of the world, because I don't believe in letting people take advantage of you. I believe that you have to stand up for yourself from time to time. And I do believe that bullying is bad, and there are some situations where kids are hurting themselves. And the NFL is the standard for a lot of things that's going to happen, not just in pro football, college football, and high school football. But as a man, you have to, somewhere down the line, I don't know.
Well, and I'll piggyback off what Howard said. Jonathan Martin, I'm not faulting him for anything he did, and I don't think that you should blame the victim. But to piggyback on what Howard said, it is surprising that a guy that got to the NFL handled it this way. There's no question about it. And I got to tell you right now, everybody's already saying Richie Incognito's probably done and his NFL career is probably over. I think it's going to be awfully awkward for Jonathan Martin going forward, because right or wrong, there's going to be a large segment of any locker room he would go into from here on out that would think that he's soft, that would think that he's weak. I'm not saying that that's fair. I'm just saying that's the perception. They will be stunned that he allowed himself to be treated the way that he did.
I want to take a look at Richie Incognito's history in this league, because, it's a checkered one. First of all, it started in college. He was suspended indefinitely by Nebraska. He was dismissed from the football program at Oregon. He was voted the NFL's dirtiest player in 2009, released by the Rams after incidents because he piled up some personal fouls, and him and Steve Spagnuolo got into it, and now suspended indefinitely by the Dolphins. And I know what both of you are saying, that Ross, you're surprised. Howard, you might even put a little bit more on Jonathan Martin for not standing up to himself. But what about the teammates? What about if they see this going on and they see that this guy, obviously, he's a little bit more fragile than others. And I know in some pre-draft reports that was something being talked about with him, too, that he's an emotional guy. But if you see that and that's your teammate, Howard, isn't it the responsibility of other teammates there to tell Richie Incognito to cut it out, to protect their brother who's clearly bothered by what's going on?
They probably did say something to Richie Incognito. They probably said something to Jonathan as well. They probably said something to both of them. But the problem is like, again, you have to, at some point, it's a tough game. And I don't want fans to think that I'm being overly sensitive to the kid being bullied or anything, or being unfair to him. But it's a tough game. In the game, you don't have an opportunity. The ideal is to move a man off a spot against his will constantly. Somewhere down the line, he needs to stand up. Now, Richie is wrong on every level. He just is. But somewhere down the line, you have to stand up. I'm not going to teach my son today. And I'll say this, and I'll be a bad person for it. I'm not going to teach my son to allow someone to take advantage of him.
Okay.
Stand up.
But what would you do if you saw somebody being taken advantage of like that?
You say something to them.
Right. As a teammate, you wouldn't let that go on, would you?
Yeah, well, again, the guy's spending, what, $15,000, sending guys to Vegas, buying. It's just a different world. And obviously, now the Dolphins have a bigger problem, because they're more concerned about hazing or rites of passage than they are about winning games.
Right.
Because if you're focused on winning games, this is not happening.
Yeah, and from a teammate perspective, I think that there's young guys that probably wouldn't speak up, but there's guys that have a little bit more pelts on the wall, if you will, that would say something. But I don't know, Ryan, that any of us know that they knew about the voicemails and the text messages. You know, I don't know that we know the intricacies of what went on and whether or not he crossed the line. Clearly, the voicemails and the text messages going over the line, I don't know how many of his teammates, if any, know about that aspect of it. And, you know, I would say as a teammate, if it was my first or second year in the league, I probably wouldn't have said anything. If it was my fourth or fifth, I might have said, if I'm on the offensive line room, all right, Richie, that's enough, man. Chill out, Richie. But I also would have said, like Howard, I would have been like, Jonathan, you can't let him do this to you. Well, you have to stand up to him. You can't pay $15,000 for those guys to go to Vegas and then not go yourself. Stand up and say, no, I'm not paying the money. Why would you pay that money? And again, I'm not blaming Jonathan. I'm just telling you the mentality that exists in an NFL locker room.
I mean, I think he paid the money because he's afraid of what was going to happen to him with Richie Incognito. Right, who's not a stable man, clearly.
Right, but doesn't that say a lot?
I mean, I think it says a lot about the fear that Richie's putting in Jonathan more than anything else.
Right. Well, probably the bigger thing here is that, you know, Richie was also one of the leaders of the team. And I think a well-liked guy in the locker room. And Jonathan's a guy that's just coming in there trying to, you know, boost his energy or boost his courage or boost whatever. And Richie's just the guy who's a point man, you know, prodding him and poking him. And he's just not standing up. They took it too far. I think that's part of it also. But again, you got to stand up.
And what's interesting about it is, you know, they play next to each other, or they did for a while. I think Richie Incognito was trying to toughen Jonathan Martin up in some sense, because he wanted to be able to feel like he could count on that guy and not have a guy next to him that he believes is soft or weak. But still, at some point, you got to move on, and you guys are teammates. I mean, I can't imagine being next to Howard. I'm a tackle, he's a tight end, and thinking that of him when we're going to battle, right, you know, at least on the NFL field together.
Really quickly here, Richie Incognito, does he ever play again in this league, Howard?
No, because of, you know, today politically correctness would say that bullying is the bad thing, that it's a terrible thing that's going on, and they were going to say that he's an awful person. He should never be in another team.
Ross?
No, he's an average player, and this makes him not worth it.
Yeah, I would say we probably all have seen the last of Richie Incognito in an NFL uniform.